All right, let's go ahead and we'll start getting on with the public comment period. Before we get started with reading the comments that came in via email, are there any members of the public that have joined us for the meeting that wish to comment in person at this time? Okay, we've received 3 comments via email that we're going to read into the record. I'll switch mics here. Well, my name's Chris Rose. I am the BLM Nevada State RAC Coordinator, and so I'll read the comments into the record. The first one, the below comments are submitted by Laura Lee, representing Wild Horse Education, a Nevada-based wild horse and burro protection organization. 1, we urge the RAC to support cooperative efforts between the advocate organizations and BLM to facilitate water hauls in drought situations. Our organization stands ready to assist with manpower, supplies, and funding if needed. 2, we encourage the RAC to recommend that this year a focus be made to utilize available PZP 22 in a concerted effort to slow population growth. 3, we recommend using 2014 as a baseline year to determine population size, migratory patterns, and create a template of wild horse use during extreme drought. Data maps must begin to exist that demonstrate wild horse use and needs and fluctuations due to environmental factors. 4, we urge that diversionary feeding be used and permitted to move horses to suitable grazing areas during times of drought. 5, we urge that areas designated as HA be evaluated for possible relocation and repatriation of wild horses. 6, we urge that areas where HMAs exist, that fracking permits not be allowed. 7, we urge that removals be limited to selective individuals where an adoption demand is demonstrated. We urge that cooperative efforts with advocate groups be encouraged to facilitate this process. 8, during times of drought, restricted use in the overburdened holding system, that any removals of wild horses occur only where other uses face restrictions and when all other options to ensure herd health, water hauling, diversionary feeding have been exhausted. Thank you. Comment number 2. I'm reading this on behalf of Denise Bolbo of the American Wild Horse Preservation Campaign, which is a coalition of more than 60 organizations working to protect America's wild horses and burros. The RAC member who earlier asked the BLM how many horses in Nevada were treated with fertility control last year brought up an important point, one that the BLM would like to sweep under the rug. In reference to fertility control, the National Academy of Sciences, in its 2013 report, was clear that tools already exist for BLM to address many challenges and that BLM was not using PZP fertility control in a manner that will impact population growth. NAS report page 13. Raul claimed this morning that the one-year PZP is sporadic. What he should have said is that the BLM application of PZP was sporadic, and this is the reason why it has had little to no impact. As the NAS stated on page 303, contracepting 500 to 1,000 mares a year with a 2-year vaccine will not substantially lower the rate of growth of a population of over 30,000 horses. The question all RAC members should be asking is, why does the BLM prefer to do nothing at all rather than implement an aggressive, humane, widely supported fertility control program to suppress horse population growth? The notion that a pharmaceutical company is going to develop some sort of magic bullet to solve the BLM's problem is frankly ludicrous. RACs spend considerable time discussing wild horse issues, and most ranchers call for the slaughter of horses as a, quote, solution. This is not supported by the American public. Poll after poll has shown the American public supports protecting wild horses and burros on public lands, and that Americans do not support the slaughtering of horses. Let's all work together on a humane fertility control program. Now that removals are not an option, perhaps the RACs will hold the BLM accountable for failing to implement this humane fertility control program, which according to the National Academy of Sciences is available today. In addition, NAS recommended against extreme population control methods that alter natural wild horse behaviors or such as spaying mares. Thus, to the extent that Gonacon preserves natural behavior patterns while effectively preventing reproduction, it is a promising candidate as a female-directed fertility control method. However, further studies of its behavioral effects are needed, page 149. On the basis of the peer-reviewed literature and the direct communication with scientists who are studying fertility control in horses and burros, the committee considers the three most promising methods of fertility control to be PZP-22, Gonacon, and a chemical vasectomy, page 152. A potential disadvantage of both surgical and chemical castration is the loss of testosterone and consequent reduction in or complete loss of male-type behaviors necessary for maintenance of social organization, band integrity, and expression of a natural behavior repertoire, page 142. The possibility that an ovarectomy, also referred to as spaying, may be followed by prolonged bleeding or peritoneal infection makes it inadvisable for field application, page 130. Denise Bolbo, American Wild Horse Preservation Campaign. Comment number 3. I respectfully submit that the best thing to do is have BLM leave our wild horses alone, period. Wild. They are not bothering anyone. There is plenty of land. We are supposed to be protecting them and not herding them up and slaughtering them and putting them in holding pens. Please do the right thing. Cheryl Newcomb, Manchester, New Hampshire. And I'm going to now ask if any other public has joined us during the comment period who wishes to present a comment. I put to the RACs in that there are no further public comments to be submitted for the record. I guess on to other administrative issues. We talked a little bit about the schedule earlier, and the question I have now is whether or not people will be willing to come in earlier tomorrow in order to facilitate getting out earlier. Instead of starting at 8 o'clock, would people want to start at 7 or 7:30? Yes, the question was, are we doing 2-hour breakout sessions for the RAC tomorrow? The answer is yes. So the time would be adjusted accordingly. So I guess show of hands, how many people would be willing to show up at 7? That appears to be the majority. So we'll start the meeting tomorrow morning at 7, have the breakout sessions from 7 to 9 o'clock, and then conduct the wrap-up and round robin after that. And I believe the Sierra Front RAC had an issue to bring forth to the other RACs.
Hi, Debbie Lassiter, Chair, Sierra Front Great Basin Northwest RAC. In our breakout, we came to a conclusion that we'd like to present an emergency resolution to all of the RACs and put it for a vote right here and now to the membership. I'll read it to you all now about due to the drought and the increasing number of wild horses, lack of long-term holding, and for the preservation of the range and humanitarian treatment of the horses, the BLM explore all options, including supporting gathers and the unconditional sale of wild horses to promote the goal of a sustainable wild horse population. Do you want to hear it again? It's the thought of the RAC that it's time to think out of the box. That we have drought, emergency situations, and while we're going to all go back and, review the wild horse drought, fire situations and make our recommendations, on our individual RAC basis, that a resolution from all 3 RACs as a group right here, right now, would be very strong. And the thought also is that gathers do need to happen, and that this is not the end-all solution, but an immediate solution, an immediate action.
What'd you say, Debbie, something about unconditional or? Unregulated, I forget. Is that the key element of, yeah?
Yeah, the unconditional sale, and also that the gathers need to happen again, and it's something to get this moving, right? So maybe you want to talk amongst yourself, and we could consider it a little bit. And, well, no, we can do it now. Yeah.
I second that emotion, yeah.
Yeah, Jeff.
So the Northeastern Great Basin. Needs a mic.
You, man.
Northeastern Great Basin RAC is conferred and offers a second to that motion.
Great. So we have a motion and a second. Can we take a vote? All in favor? Show of hands. Show of hands. Well, we have a motion and a second. We're doing this all as one big group, so can we just have a show of hands then? All in favor? Lisa, can we get a count maybe? Oh, I can't vote. I can't vote.
Tim, you can only put up one hand.
I'm 21.
And-
We both had 21.
Yeah, you have to subtract me, sorry. And then all those opposed? All right. We have a motion that has passed. Thank you, everyone. So, Raul, we have something for you. Raul and Amy.
So while we're still in public comment period open, can we continue some additional business-related items? Yes. So the Northeastern Great Basin RAC would like to invite the other RAC members and staff to a icebreaker or informal event over at the Western Folklife Center at the corner of Railroad and 5th Street, convening at 1700 or 5 p.m. So please wander over if you're so inclined and join us. And welcome to Elko. Please spend money. And if you can't spend money in Elko, at least spend it in Elko County. So.
There used to be a sign going to Oregon that said.
It's funny, I go to the museum and I want to check out the central plant. Especially when you got that.
This is exciting. You said you interviewed Joe Doucette this week?
And are there any other issues that need to be brought up while we're waiting for our next presentation? Okay, we'll begin momentarily with the presentation from the Nevada Land Management Task Force. we're streaming this live over the web, so. Yeah, just hold the mic and kind of keep it close to you.
Okay.
And then stand over here so we can get a shot.
Okay. My name is Demar Dahl. I've been trying to lose my voice, so I hope you can all hear me. I'm a county commissioner here in Elko County. I'm the chairman of the Nevada Land Management Task Force, and I appreciate the opportunity to and the invitation to come and visit with you today. I think I should first give you a little history of how the task force came about. In 2009, we had here in Elko County, a travel management plan presented by the Forest Service. Elko County signed up as a coordinating agency on the travel management plan. Worked hard, we thought, to try to get as much input as we could into what the result was going to be. We were not successful. We ended up having a congressional hearing here in Elko. Many of you will remember that. We had 64 counties from around the West participate in one way or another. When it was all said and done and there was a record of decision, we were left out. We only managed to get one small concession. So, meeting with some of the other counties after that experience, we were talking about what is it that we might be able to do to bring more local control over our natural resources. And the state of Utah had just passed their HB 148 bill, which called for the transfer of the public lands from the federal government to the state. We thought that might be a good place to start. We formed the American Lands Council. That was a year ago last May. Now there are 5 states that have passed legislation to work on this issue. Here in Nevada, our AB 227 bill was passed, which calls for the transfer of the land, and it also establishes a task force to study the implications of a transfer. And the task force is made up of 1 member from each county, and the way it turned out, all but 1 of those members is a county commissioner. I see at least 1 of you here today who is a representative on the task force. Our responsibility given to us by the task force was to do a number of things. One of them was to consider the cost and the economics of a transfer, both the transfer and the management of the land after the transfer. So that's where we started. We had available to us 2 studies that were done in the 90s, and we started on those studies and then went to the organization that prepared those studies in the 90s and contracted with them to update those studies. We also need to determine which lands we are going to be asking that be transferred and how they're going to be managed. And we have, as fast as we can, because we're up against a pretty short timeline, we've been working on this as hard as we can. We started in September. We have met in Eureka, Winnemucca, Reno, Las Vegas, and Carson City twice. We will meet every month between now and September when we make our final report. And our report goes to the Legislative Public Lands Committee. And yesterday, they met in Las Vegas, and I made the report on behalf of the task force to the Legislative Public Land Committee. We also had Dr. Mike Boffman there, who was the one that heads up the Intertech, which did the economic analysis for the state of Nevada. And he also reported to the Legislative Public Land Committee on that. In the process, we have tried to be as inclusive as we can and to get as much comment and as much interest in this process as possible. And we have determined 17 is that's quite a few to have on a committee or a task force, and so it's a bit of a challenge. But we have really been lucky, I think, because we have got really good, dedicated people on that task force, and it's really well balanced. I just left a county commission meeting over here, and we were talking about the balance on that task force. And one of our commissioners said, I thought it was going to be balanced toward the idea that, yeah, we need to make the transfer, and instead it turned out to be balanced the other way. But we agreed that we would not vote early on anything, but first we would just gather a lot of information, and then we would start trying to work toward a consensus. The way it's turned out, we haven't voted on anything, but we've been working. It's been just kind of automatic that we've been coming to a consensus on a number of issues. And in my report yesterday, I went through what we have done and who we have heard from. We have had presentations from a number of people, the state agencies, state lands, conservation and natural resource. We have had stake user presentations from a number of the stakeholders out there on the public lands. We've had the Sierra Club, Nevada Conservation League, Coalition of Wildlife, Nevada Farm Bureau. We have squozen in as many as we could, trying to get as much information as we can. And in the process, we've started to come together on a lot of, not a lot, but some of the very important, I think, ideas. One of those, besides being required by the legislation to address some of these issues, it's also, those issues are also some of the issues that come up first in a conversation when we talk about the transfer of the public lands. And one of the first things you hear is, well, we can't afford it. And from what information we have gotten so far, we have determined as a task force that yes, indeed, we can afford the transfer, and we can afford, in fact, we can afford to manage the public lands at a considerable profit to the state, considerable. And those figures will be coming out. In fact, those are available on the NACO, Nevada Association of County website if you want to visit that and have a look at those. NACO is the supporting entity for the task force. One of the other questions that comes up is it constitutional? Does the Constitution require a transfer? And is it constitutional to make that? We invited the Assistant Attorney General from Utah, Mr. Rampton, and who took the position that yes, it is, and a law professor from the University of Colorado, Dr. Skłowski, who took the opposite position. We had an interesting discussion on that, and I think the task force came to the conclusion that yes, it is. One of the other questions that always comes up is, what about being able to do the things that we do on the public lands? Are we going to lose those activities that we now have? And so one of the other things that we have agreed to is that the valid existing rights on the public lands now, and the multiple uses, and the access would have to be transferred with the land. In other words, whatever you can do out there now, it is going to be our recommendation that you're going to be able to do then. That part is not going to change. One of the other issues that always comes up is, will it be sold? And who's going to buy it? Our recommendation is that there would not be a wholesale sale of the public lands, but there's quite a lot of land out there right now that has been designated for disposal by the agencies, and we think we could start there. We could go to the railroad corridor, which has checkerboarded land 20 miles each side of the railroad. It goes the width of the state, which is an area that the federal agencies and the state and private interests have for years been trying to get blocked up or sold. So we think we can go there. We think that the state would be able to make those sales happen, where now there's just so many obstacles to those sales taking place with the federal agencies that it's just not happening now. So those are some of the things that we just have kind of coalesced on, that we have come to a consensus on. What I want to do is leave enough time here to let you ask questions of me, because there might be some questions on how this is happening and why. And it is happening in 5 states now where the process is being worked on. And it looks like probably after this legislative session there will be at least 2 more states that will join. Do you have any questions?
What percent of the land with that bill, what percent of the land that's underneath the federal government now would be transferred to the state if it passed?
That's a good question, and that's one of the other things that we have discussed, and I think come to sort of at least to an agreement on. And that is that it would be to the benefit of the states in the West who think they would want to get the lands transferred to all be working generally from the same position and wanting the same lands, because this is something that's going to have to happen in Congress. And Utah has set the template for this. They have taken off the table the national monuments, national parks, and congressionally designated wilderness areas. Of course, there are the Indian lands, military lands that would not be considered, and I think that's probably where the task force is going to come down. And those lands, I think, we would not include.
But the balance of it would be then.
Yeah, and this is something that if the transfer takes place, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. You know, there's going to be a long transition period. There are a lot of things to figure out in the process. And so it's something that's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of people like this group here that is going to want to have a lot of input into how it's done, and then what it's going to be like after it's done.
Would the Wild Horse and Burro Act be a part of the baggage that comes with it?
Well, let's go to the.
He's going to give it away.
Let's go to the sage grouse.
That's what we'll get first.
The sage grouse for a minute. You know, the plan that we got on the sage grouse without any hearing or opportunity to comment for the interim management plan, which some think, and in a lot of ways I think is probably correct, that's really more detrimental to us in Nevada than if the bird were listed. And that's what we're operating under now. And so that definitely would be different. How about the wild horses? I don't know. You just passed that motion here. I don't know if that was in the form of a resolution or what, but at NACO, the Nevada Association of Counties, we have filed a lawsuit on the horses to require asking the court to require BLM to abide by the law, because the law says that they will do what your motion just said that they should do. So anyway, I personally think this would be a wonderful thing for the state of Nevada. I have committed to the task force that I would not push my agenda, and that we would all just work to try to come to some kind of a consensus based on all of the information that we're able to get. And yes.
Okay, I have a question. We have a bill proposed in legislature also. It's HR 2455. It's the Nevada Native Nations Land Act. And in this, we're asking for the withdrawal and the lands being given to, and they're tribes from all over the state.
Right.
But our tribes up here, specifically our South Fork Band, we're asking for 26,000 acres, and they're the checkerboards that already border our reservation and our traditional grazing allotments. But so what will your bill do to affect ours?
Well, the Native American interests need to be protected in this process, and that's something we have not done, and we need to bring that issue into make it a part of the process. The Ruby Valley Treaty, for instance, which has been hanging out there for a long time, which includes land into California all the way up through Nevada, Idaho, and Utah. If that land were transferred to, or a big chunk of it were transferred to the state, then do any claims on the treaty, do they automatically go away? And are there claims that are valid claims there now? I mean, when you get into this, there are a lot of issues that are going to have to be, but it's going to be a good thing. It's going to be a good thing. It's going to bring us all to the table and give us an opportunity to, I think, fix a lot of the problems that we have on the public lands. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Same.
I was just curious what some of the milestones in the future will be. So you got AB, was it
227.
227. So you got AB 227, you form the task force, and then the task force passes some sort of resolution, and then does it go back to the legislature, or does it go to Sandoval?
We make our report in the 1st of September to the Legislative Public Lands Committee. Okay, then our job is done. And then what we will make to them probably is a proposed BDR legislation. And then I assume that they will take that to the legislature, and we'll see if where it goes from there.
Out of curiosity, do you know where it goes? I'm just hypothetically here. If it goes past they pass it, then it goes to Sandoval. For a signature, sure. Where does the federal government come in there?
We would have a bill. Utah has a bill. I assume that by then, because that will be June. Well, the deadline is June of 2015. That there will be a number of bills in other states, and then we will, of course, while this is happening. In fact, it's being worked on a little bit now. There will be federal legislation being put together, and trying to get different legislators to sign on to a bill that would make the transfer. This, as the country has been settled, there were, like in 1829, there were 5 western states that went to the Congress and said, hey, our enabling act said that we're going to get the land, and we haven't. And Illinois had 4% of its land. There was Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Arkansas, I forget which states went together and got their land. But once we got to Colorado, it just hasn't happened. The federal government still owns and controls more than 50% of everything in the West.
Thank you.
A statement earlier that what if the transfer goes through, that all rights and uses would then transfer over as well to the state? Is that correct?
Well, you have to recognize that we have no say-so. We only recommend, but that, I think, will be the recommendation of the task force, yes.
Okay, my question to you, have you addressed the situation where with right-of-ways and mining claims, and would the state then honor the stipulations and agreements that are currently in place with the BLM?
Yes, that would be the idea.
Including easements in perpetuity?
Sure, if you, in other words, if you can do it now, or if you can go there now, then what we would like to see is you're going to be able to do it then. We think, if anything, access is going to be better then than it is now. But a mining claim, rights of way, everything should transfer, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay. Okay, any other questions? Thanks. Got one. Okay.
Instead of the wholesale transfer, I guess, from federal to state, has the task force explored or asked the question, how can we enhance or support or provide some support to better manage the current system?
You mean change the system as it is rather than make the transfer?
Basically.
Right. Well, that's the reason that this issue is out there now, is because we have failed so many times in trying to change the way we're doing it now. And so we just think that we haven't been able to make the changes, and it's time to, our enabling act is identical to Nebraska's. Nebraska has less than 3% public land. And we just think it's time that we mature as a nation, and even some of the states in the East, the state of South Carolina passed a resolution to support this effort, because the states in the West send money out here for us, for PILT and so on. And we just think it's time, yeah?
You're using the case of Nebraska, and I know that Nebraska didn't have a whole lot of trouble giving away its land under the Homestead Act when they tried, because some of it is arable, and it rains there, and they tried to give this stuff away for 100 years, and nobody wanted it because it's not productive, and guys were able to use it for nothing. So I don't think the comparisons are even.
Well, we haven't tried to give this away, and we're not. And this is
for 100 years, the government tried to give it away.
No,
and nobody wanted it because
this is not the effort now to give it away. This you have to understand that all we're talking about in this legislation is the transfer of the public land from the federal government to the state. And from time to time, I will hear comments from people, say in Virginia or Vermont, that say, this is public land that belongs to everybody, and now we're able to use it, and we don't want to lose it. Well, it's not going to be lost. The only thing that changes is that the ownership and the management will be the state of Nevada, not the federal government. And what we've been saying, anything that you can do on it now, you can do on it then. If you live in Richmond, Virginia, and you come out here and you want to go fishing someplace where you can go fish now, you're still going to be able to go fish, or you're going to be able to do anything that you could do then. It's just that the management will be closer to home than it is now.
No, you need the microphone.
A lot of us have patented land which the government held the precious metals and oil and gas rights on. Now, if that land is transferred to the state, will the gas and minerals and stuff be transferred to the state, or will it stay with the federal government?
Well, like I've said before, all we do is make recommendations, and what
What
we're
would
saying,
your recommendation
we're
be then?
saying that the recommendation, I'm sure we're going to be recommending that everything stays the same. Nobody's going to lose their rights, and the federal government, if the federal government has
Maybe you didn't get my
on the
question
split,
right.
when you're talking about the split estates and you're talking about
Okay.
above ground and below ground, those are some issues that we're going to have to work out. There's a lot of things, like I say, that to figure out how we're going to do this.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Just a couple of quick questions. Who's going to take over the firefighting duties on public land? Would the state go ahead and take that? And also, what are you guys considering with the wilderness study issue? Would you be calling for release, or would those remain federal land?
Well, like I say, we haven't voted on anything yet, and I'm just talking about issues that I think we all agree on at this point. When it comes to fire, this is an important aspect as of the economic analysis done by Intertech, and get a hold of that on the NACO website. This is an issue for one of the states that's working hard to push the legislation is Montana. Montana and Idaho and Washington especially are interested in this issue because of the fires and where they have so much forest. And their forests have just been decimated by fire through a lack of management. And like Governor Otter said, when he flies across Idaho from his plane, he can look down and he can see the forests that are managed by the state and the ones that are managed by the Forest Service. And because one of them is managed and the other one isn't, and the one that isn't burns. And so, but anyway, the cost of fighting fire is included in the analysis that Intertech made. When just a minute, let me say this: when I'm on the national board, the NACO board for national and Western Interstate Region. When I used to go to meetings with other members from around the West, the things that you would hear them talk about a lot was we need more money in SRS, and we need a more surety that we're going to get. And SRS was a bill passed called Secure Rural Schools, passed in the year 2000, because after the spotted owl was listed, many of those communities in the Northwest that were dependent upon the timber industry have died. And so Congress said, well, we killed them, now we need to give them some money to keep a police force and keep their schools going and so on and so forth. So what I used to hear a lot was, we need more money in SRS. And now what I hear is, we need to be able to manage our own resource. We need the resource. We need the income that comes out of the timber, and we need to manage it so that it doesn't all burn. And when you consider the sage grouse and what that's going to do to the state of Nevada, if that bird gets listed, we're going to be quite a lot in the same position as a lot of the communities because of the spotted owl. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's fine. So should this transfer happen, what is the economic impact on the residents of Nevada? Taxes?
It would be very beneficial. And I don't know how much time have I got here. You all willing to listen for another hour and a half? The study done by Intertech takes Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Idaho and studied their state lands, how they're managed, what it costs to manage them, what the income is. And then that is combined and extrapolated to Nevada because we only have 3,000 acres of state-owned land. So you can't figure anything out based on that. But the result of that study is that that there would be considerable income to the state of Nevada based on if we manage the land. And in those other states, the profit that they make on management of their public lands generally goes to the schools. So it would be a great benefit to the schools. We passed a bill in 2009 for a $620 million tax increase that was supposed to sunset in 2011 and then 2013. You remember that? It hasn't. So that was for the biennium, so it turned out to be a $310 million tax per year. And based on the figures from the studies in the 90s, the net income after management was paid for the state of Nevada would be $301 million a year. And now that has increased because of what's been happening in the other states with their oil and with their income from their resources. And that has gone up to about 800. That would be about $800 million for the state of Nevada.
Now,
so, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Are there contingencies to fight the lawsuits that come to the state that the federal government fights on, that ultimately ties their hands on following through on acts such as the Wild Horse and Burro Act?
Yeah, this is not going to change human nature.
Mm-hmm.
This bill, that's for sure. Yeah, they'll still be there, undoubtedly. Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Chairman Dahl mentioned the 3,000 acres of state land that's still left from the school trust. And I want to remind everybody that that was originally 400,000 acres. And some of the things that we people who are supporting public lands, is what we fear is that the pressure to sell these lands, the pressure on the state, which is always in a budget crisis, it seems, the pressure would be just too great, and that many of these acres would be disposed just to make, you know, a little bit of money, no matter what the sale cost. Anyway, I wonder, Chairman Dahl, has any consideration been given to, if the state were to acquire these lands, some kind of conservation easement for broad stretches of land?
Yeah, it's included. In fact, wilderness area is included in the legislation. But to your point about the number of acres that we have now compared to the number of acres that we were given, you know, when we were given our school lands, it was a certain portion of every township, and some of those lands were in places where it was of no value to us, and so we ended up trading those into the Truckee Meadows and into places, for instance, where it's a lot more valuable to us, and it decreased, of course, the number of acres a lot. But as far, when you examine what's been happening in Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Idaho, Arizona, for instance, sells land. And the land that they sell is like the land that we sell here in Nevada in the SLPNMA, the Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act, which made land available to be sold for development in the Las Vegas Valley. There is land in the Phoenix area that's being sold. But at the same time, the acres that the state owns has increased. So that argument, although it seems like, yeah, that is something that may very well happen, that the state would have more pressure to sell the land, it's not being played out. That isn't the way it's working in these other states, and so I think we can assume that we could figure it out just like they have, how that we could maintain, preserve our public lands. Okay, thank you.
All right, as we mentioned before, the last presentation, the schedule has been changed, and we're now going to start at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, which means we'll be starting to stream during the round robin and the wrap-up session that will start at 9, and we should be getting out of here sometime between 10:30 and 11 o'clock. So are there any other questions or issues for the group? All right, don't forget about the mixer being hosted by the Northeast RAC, and we will see you tomorrow at 7 a.m. Thank you.